For the moment, I was glad to join her, setting in the sandbox. I ignored the little voice in the back of my head that worked overtime to keep us alive. It said we didn't have a moment to waste. The monsters of doom could be upon us any second, burning away our little victory faster than the setting sun. Comes a time when you have to say to hell with it, if only for a moment. Arlene and I had recently faced the worst thing anyone can face, worse than the monsters or dying in space. We knew what it meant to lose your sanity and come back to yourself again. Arlene started whistling Molly Malone. She'd picked one of the few songs to which I knew the words. I sung along. All that was missing was a bottle of Tullamore Dew, the world's finest sipping whiskey. As it was, our duet seemed to transform the lengthening shadows of dusk in Utah into the cool glades of Ireland. I wondered if doom had come there. Were there demons in Dublin? Did the men there see little green leprechauns instead of Martians in their moment of madness? I wondered about the whole world, and it was too much for me. Right now, the world was a stretch of desert in Utah. What we could do for ourselves, for the human race, for the world, would be determined here, as it had been on Deimos, and before that, Phobos. We'd take it one world at a time. I lay back happily for a few moments, watching the stars wink into existence in the darkening sky. As night fell, we spotted a glow, due east. That was the way to bet. Salt Lake City, I guessed. We gathered together what had survived the crash and followed the light. We took a break at 9 p.m., another at midnight.
"How long do you think this is going to take?"
she asked. Not sure, but I'm glad we brought the provisions. The bag survived the crash just as nicely as we did. We had water. We had biscuits and granola bars. We had flashlights, which we wisely didn't use. But I sure as hell wished we had some weapons, other than one puny knife in the provisions bag. We trekked at night and slept by day. Hell, I saw Lawrence of Arabia. After Phobos and Deimos and nearly splattering ourselves over old terra firma. After all we'd survived, I'd be damned if we were going to cash in our chips here. Hell, we could go to Nevada to do that. The water held out better than the food. We huddled together in the cold during the day when we slept. We could have made a fire, but no point giving away our location with unnecessary light. And there was one thing about the situation creepy enough to encourage caution, even though we hadn't run into any trouble yet. Arlene was the first to notice it.
"Fly, there are no sounds."
"What do you mean?" I asked. We crunched along in the night, heading toward a glow that seemed barely bigger than it was 3 days ago.
"The night creatures. No owls."
"Are there owls in the desert?"
"I don't know. Maybe not. But there should be something. No bugs. No lizards. No nothing."
I thought about it. If we've seen the collapse of civilization, you'd expect wild dogs.
"There's no coyotes. Nothing. Even out here there ought to be something. Unless everything was killed by the weapons."
No, that can't be right. We'd be puking up our guts by now from poison or radiation. That light suggests somebody's still in business.
"I hope so,"
she said.
"So you think that's Salt Lake City?"
Should be.
Salt Lake City, Utah?
Unless it's wintering in Florida. She was silent for 100 paces. Then she cleared her throat.
"Fly, I have to confess something to you. Again."
"Any time."
"I sort of have a problem with the Mormon church,"
she said. Making out her face in the dim light wasn't easy. I wished we had a full moon instead of the sliver hanging over us like a scythe. "You were a Mormon?" I asked.
"No, but my brother was, briefly."
"You blame the church for whatever happened." She shook her head.
"No, I guess not. He had problems before he joined the church. Had problems when he left.
Do you think he might be here? I asked.
Nah, we lived in North Hollywood. He left for Utah when he became a Mormon, but after he left the church, I don't know what became of him. I don't care if I ever even see him again.
I'll never bring it up, I said.
There's another reason I'm telling you this,
she went on.
I became obsessed with Mormonism while he was with them. I read books by them and against them. I even read the Book of Mormon.
Maybe that could come in useful, I suggested.
I doubt it. It just makes me more prejudiced. Look, Fly, if we find living human beings at the end of this, we must stand with them and fight with them. I'm promising you right now I won't discuss religion with any of those patriarchal...
She paused long enough for me to jump in. I get the picture.
Do you have any opinions about them?
She asked quite fairly. Well, I read an article about them having a strong survivalist streak, that they stockpile a year's supply of food and stuff like that. You'll get a kick out of this. When I visited LA once, I took in the sights: Disneyland, the La Brea Tar Pits, Paramount Studios, the Acker Mansion, and I even found time to go into their big temple at the end of Overland Avenue. There's an angel up top with a trumpet. I mistakenly called him Gabriel.
They must have loved that. It's the Angel Moroni.
Well, now I know.
I used to drop the I off that name when I used it.
I took a deep breath. Arlene, I'm gonna hold you to that promise not to talk theology with him.
Scout's honor,
she said. Were you ever a scout? She didn't answer again. We kept the flashlights off. The glow on the horizon was the only illumination I wanted in that desert. It was easy to follow the direction at night. We made sure that we didn't waste opportunities.
You're burning nightlight,
Arlene would say when it was her turn to wake me up. Then she'd snicker. Something amused her, but she didn't let me in on it. Turned out that we ran out of food, but we had more water than we needed. It took us 5 days to get to Salt Lake City, the center of what once had been the Mormon world, and by God, it still was. We lay on our bellies in some brush, shielding our eyes from the sun, leaning against a side-paneled truck.
They're people,
marveled Arlene as we watched hundreds of men on the streets in the early dawn. They relieved other men who'd obviously been doing the night shift. Where do you think the women are? I whispered.
Home, minding the kids. Mormons are so damned patriarchal.
Arlene. We were in a good spot to see plenty, behind a wrecked truck on a rise. As the sun crawled up the sky, shafts of light came through the broken windows like laser beams, one blinding me for a second. We positioned ourselves to see more. There was plenty to see. The streets of this garrison town had over 1,000 men with guns, and to my surprise, I made out a few women and teenage girls toting heavy artillery. Arlene gave me one of her funny looks. I didn't make her take back anything she'd said. When a society is threatened, it will do what it must, or go down fast.
You don't think they might be working with the aliens?
Asked my buddy. I had the same thought, but they didn't act zombified, and we'd learned that the monsters preferred human lackeys in that condition. The spider mind had made only one exception when it needed knowledge, and the human brain of poor Bill Rich. We had to make contact with these people, but I preferred doing it in a way that wouldn't get us shot. While I was formulating a plan, Arlene tapped me on the shoulder. I turned and found myself staring down both barrels of a 12-gauge duck gun. It had gorgeous, inlaid detail work running all 75 centimeters of the stock and barrel, and it was attached to a beefy hand connected to a large body, with a grinning, boyish face topping it off. 22, 23 tops. "How do?" said the man. His buddy was a lot thinner, and he held an old Ruger Mini 14 pointed at Arlene. He caught my expression and grinned at me as if he could read my mind. Here was proof positive we were facing honest-to-God, living humans. They had pride in a good weapon. "Hi," I said, moving my eyes from man to man.
"Good morning,"
said Arlene. "Hey," said the other man, by way of greeting, noticing how my eyes kept drifting to his piece.
"Took me quite a while to get one of these,"
he said conversationally. "Beautiful weapon," I said, noticing that the beefy guy was still calm. The thin one nodded and said,
"They're compact, easy handling, fast shooting, and hard hitting."
He paused and then added,
"Don't you agree?"
Dunk. The penny dropped. They were testing us.
"Oh, yes,"
said Arlene, jumping in. The thin guy looked at her a little funny and waited for me to say something. "One of my favorite weapons," I said. "Hardly any kick. Not like the bigger calibers." Finally, the big guy spoke again. "Jerry, these people don't want a lecture." Jerry squinted at him.
"They're military. Look at their clothes."
We weren't asked to confirm or deny anything, so we kept our mouths shut. Jerry had plenty of words left in him.
"They're interested in a good weapon, aren't you?"
He looked straight at me and I answered right away. "I sure am, especially that one you've got." Jerry smiled and went on.
"Albert gets tired of hearing me go on about what a good model this is. They were even reasonably priced until they were outlawed." "Not a problem now," said Arlene. "I'm sure there's plenty of squashed zombies you can take one offen."
Whenever she spoke, the men seemed a bit uncomfortable. I had the impression she was getting off on it. Arlene looked over at me and winked. We'd fought enough battles to read each other's expressions and body language. Her expression told me that things were looking up as far as she was concerned, but she couldn't resist getting in the act.
"I like an M14,
she said. Jesus. It was like going shooting with Gunnery Sergeant Goforth and his redneck buddies. The men started to warm to her a little.
"Good choice for a military gal,"
said Albert. We all just kind of stood there for a moment, smiling at each other, and then Albert broke the ice by changing the subject. He asked in the same friendly tone of voice,
"You wouldn't happen to be in league with those ministers of Satan invading our world?" "We were wondering the same thing about you,"
said Arlene. I gave her a dirty look for that. The beefy kid with a double-barreled duck gun chuckled.
"Don't mind her saying that, mister. It shows a proper godly attitude. I hope you both check out. I like you. We talk the same language, but we can't take any chances."
They searched us both thoroughly, found the knife, and impounded it. We were weaponless. In a way, I was glad. These guys weren't acting like amateurs, which meant they had a chance against the invaders.
"Okay,"
said the man with the bird gun.
"We'll take you to the president of the Council of 12.
Arlene grimaced, which told me she knew what he was talking about, but she kept her promise. Not a word came out of her about the religious stuff. The title sounded impressive enough to tell me that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was still in business. Big time. Maybe she was right, and they were a cult. But I don't know any difference between a cult and a religion, except as a popularity contest. They had survived, and we needed allies against the monsters. I knew one more thing about the Mormons that I hadn't mentioned to Arlene. During our little chat in the desert, a friend I trusted with Washington connections told me that a good part of Mormon self-reliance was to really prepare for every eventuality. After their tumultuous history, extreme caution was understandable. Result? There were a lot of Mormons in the government, in the FBI, in the various services, in the CIA, even in NASA. God help anyone who tried to play Hitler with the Mormons as the Jews. The Mormons should be ideal allies against a literal demonic invasion. Arlene and I would find out soon enough.